So 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I intended to make an archive, but it was supposed to be an archive, and I wanted to do it with more friends, artist friends, because I thought it was nice to do something with other artists. And somehow I chose like a space that would fit very well in the countryside for 4 artists. Originally I wanted to do it in the city, but then my old professor Vigrid, he seduced me, or he asked if we could do it in the countryside. And we did that, or I did that, and then suddenly all the other artists disappeared, no? And then suddenly I had like this countryside place, and I was always a city boy, you know. I mean, I was afraid of rainworms, you know, so I couldn't touch too much in the ground and stuff. And I think I just went on doing the project. And what happened is that 6 years later, I find myself in another place, no? And I think many times that those are the best decisions in life, because it's not calculated or it's not intentional, but that you take decisions in your life, and then suddenly you wake up and you find yourself mentally in another space, no? And it really came, you know, like, because I mean, it is quite a big space. So, for example, when I was younger, I would always fly because I was so privileged that you know, when it was cold in Berlin, I would go to Mexico or Thailand, warmer places, no? But with this situation, it was like, you know, Berlin can be really gray and really dark, no? So it's not only cold, it's just dark. And but I was like, if I have this place, I also just have to learn how to. You cannot renovate or you cannot work with a space unless you know the seasons too, no? So weirdly, I decided that, or practically, I decided to every 21st of December, the darkest day of the year, no, I would fly there and I would spend my time just to know what it is, no? And that's the beauty of life, because then suddenly you discover that, you know, darkness is beautiful, no? And like when everything is so, you know, gray and dark, like you perceive colors and light just in a different way. And I think since I worked as an artist, I always was interested in these construction that that society is proposing us, no? So we have this value system that summer is nicer than winter, or all these kind of creation of desire, basically, no? And through that project, I just learned a lot about myself and the way that I perceive certain things, no? And that comes back to the garden, because I spent so much time there. So that was also a very practical decision, because I had some land, no? So I thought, okay, maybe I should hire like a gardener, because then she could do like some vegetables or something, because there's a lot of people out there, no? And I tell you, you know, like I thought that I knew what, because we, you know, we're privileged, so I can buy like ecological food and seasonal food. And suddenly I discovered that all my knowledge was created by supermarkets, no? Because I didn't know what grows seasonal. I didn't know what was growing regional. Only like through what the supermarkets is telling you, no? And so that became like this weird travel into food even, no? And one of the problem was that it was not more than 5,000 square meter, the vegetable garden, no? But you know, there was so much food coming out of these things, so we started to feed like squash to the chickens and whatever, because we overproduced, no? And that just, you know, like it was a strange journey, because I think I started like around, my early 40s, and being out there, no, I realized I didn't knew like all these names of flowers that's growing out there. The trees, I had no knowledge of trees. The birds that were singing out there, I was like, I was totally ignorant, no? And at the same time, I had like, I knew names of directors of museums, curators, whatever, and there was just a unbalance, of knowledge. So then I started to think, okay, it was also a time where my father, he couldn't, because this very important project for me where I include my father's writing. So we started with this letter that's in the exhibition, and that was the first piece that I did. It was this. Like when I grew up, my father had like these shitty restaurants. It was not restaurants. It was really like, selling burgers and stuff. No? And I always knew that he had a beautiful handwriting because he hated to do the burgers. No? So my mother did that, and then, if he had the chance to do the signs, he would use days on writing, burger, pommes frites, and Coca-Cola or whatever, 20 kroner or whatever it would cost, and then he would just use all his time on like just doing these perfect signs, and at a certain point I was so interested in this idea because Vietnamese written language is the only Asian language that was transformed into Latin, like phonetically, because the old script was Chinese. So any Vietnamese that reads and writes Vietnamese, they do it in Latin. So as an immigrant, he never learned, he barely speaks Danish, but any foreign language, he don't know how to write, but he writes the alphabet perfectly. So I had like this idea that his beautiful handwriting and this opaqueness and mutation that lies in it. Because I was in a residency in Paris and I researched into these missionaries that were killed in Vietnam before France occupied Vietnam. So I found like this in the archive, in a really beautiful museum, in the seminary that trains missionaries to go abroad. And then I found like Théophile Vénard, which is, he's a saint today, but he's the most famous of the missionaries that got killed. And what was special about him is that he also wrote to his own family. Usually you write to the priest in the seminary, but he wrote like this goodbye letter to his father. And when I discovered that, I was just like, shit, this is what my father have to write till the day that he dies. So we started that project in 2009, where anybody that orders the letter, then he sits at home, and he sends it out. And the reason why it costs 300, it was because at the time it was like 100 for me, 100 for my father, and then 100 for the gallery. And then it was a conceptual piece, so it could never change the price either. Because I really believe that the best piece that an artist should do should also be the cheapest. So it inflates, and it has like all these kind of things that it's not an edition, or it constitutes together a body of work, because today I've been writing 2,500 letters. And what I also find beautiful is that he just, because in the beginning he didn't knew what he was writing, and I just gave him 100 euros and then he writes it and he sends it. And then because he was chatting on this website with expat Vietnamese or whatever, so he found like some Vietnamese living in a French-speaking country, and he had it translated, And when he discovered what he was writing, he was like, "But Yang, why didn't you tell me that I'm writing this important letter?" And then he started to send it to the Vatican, he sent it to churches he liked around the world. And when my nieces, when they were small, for their birthdays, he would send them a letter. So it was this work that just got its own life, and the more, I mean, it's this weird work that was so important as a reference work for me because it created its own rules too. And so in that sense, that was when I started with my father's handwriting, almost as drawings, because it was this weird thing that culturally that had traveled to Vietnam and then it embodied in his body and it travels back, so it had all these kind of elements that I was very attracted to. And then I also then I started to do, he did like big wall drawings and like writings on floors and stuff. But now he's getting a little bit fragile, so I can't send him to going on the scaffolding and do these things. And then when the flower came about, I thought it was such a beautiful, it's almost like a parenthesis for the work because it fits to his body that he just needs to write the flowers, And then I started to take these photos of flowers, and that became this weird combination. First of all, for me to learn the names of flowers, and then what was good for my father because scale-wise, So it somehow becomes the parenthesis of this body of work. I hope that gave some meaning.
So you sometimes combine past works and ethnic works, and this time you exhibit the photography of the flowers which you took from your garden and also the flowers at the florist shops. And also together with the sculpture made by marble, which is from the 1st century in Rome. So I would like to ask the relationship between those works. The meaning of the combination.
I totally forgot that. So one of my methods of working is to try to work in contradiction and work with contrast. So material-wise, I really like what I try with an installation like this. In general, all my installation is testing grounds because I never work with a studio, so I never prepare anything before. It's really like the exhibition place becomes like the testing grounds, for how things are working together. And one of my main what I'm very interested in is to break up these kind of definitions and categorizations, like the difference between a photo and a sculpture. In my mind, I don't have that differentiation. I think those things works beautifully together in all their differences. So when I started to do like this body of work with flowers from my garden, I also simultaneously started to work with a flower shop which is underneath my apartment in Berlin. And what I wanted to do was to take two different kind of worlds, like the privilege that I can hire a gardener and build like a flower garden. That was one thing. So that was when I did that body of work with my own garden. But I also thought, okay, if I do that, then I should also be able to take the same strategy with the flowers from this small flower shop underneath my apartment. And I'm a very good client at that flower shop, so we know each other well, and they also cook for me and stuff. So and it's a Vietnamese family, So in Berlin, the cheap flower shops are dominated by Vietnamese. So I was fortunate to meet like this beautiful family that was running this beautiful flower shop, and I wanted to. Then I started to spend a lot of time, and I basically also work there, and I do a lot of things there, and then I started I wanted to do a parallel body of flowers, which is the same I mean, I use different kind of cameras. Like for my own garden, I use an iPhone, and for this one, I use a very fancy Leica. um, and that was just it. It was a beautiful parallel project to do because they look the same, you know. And people really don't get that yet because it just looks the same, you know. But there's just this world in difference because it's everything that they do is economized in their small shop, you know. And like all these projects I do is almost a research project because even though I've done it for a couple of years, it's a learning process for me too, you know? Because then you get into the dirty business of flower market, which is equally as bad as food market, you know? And one of the worst things is that people like me that can buy, fancy ecological food, we are also the one that buys these fancy flowers, you know? And so it's really like a project also just to confront myself and my thinking and flowers. And what you see here is really only the flower shop. So there's, what I tend to do is to present them so it looks like a big bouquet, you know. But then there's always small elements in the photos that becomes then a portrait of one that owns one and Tan, the mother and daughter that runs the flower shop, and the absence of them, you know? And in this particular installation, I really, then I try to put the Roman sculpture in, which is like this very Rodin idea of absence and presence in sculptures, you know? And that's actually the same that's in the photo, just in a different way, you know? And my obsession with Roman sculpture, and this is one of them, no? Because there's not all of them. It's like when I cut it up, the first sculptures ever, Roman sculpture. No? I have a friend that deals with marble, and he was like, he wanted to come because he never saw a sculpture, a Roman sculpture, cut it up. No? So we just did it at the time, no? And when we did it, he was there, and because I don't know anything about marble, no? And then he was like, shit, this is crystalline marble, no? So this is Greek marble in a Roman sculpture. But the Romans, we think that they were using Carrara, or Carrara became the big thing for the Romans, no? But it turns out that the Romans, they were, of course, not only appropriating Roman forms, but they also appropriated the material. So that was why they fancied like crystalline marble, which is a Greek marble, no? And we were just like, but shit, this is like Charles Ray 2,000 years ago, no? Because we forget that when they adopted like the crystalline marble, they painted over the sculptures after, no? So you couldn't, it was a conceptual thing. And we only discovered it by these cracks and to cut it, no? And this is why we kept like the crack more open, because it shows the crystalline, no? So it's like this. It's this sculpture that deals with the inside, outside, it's a strange thing that I still. It's a little bit like the Japanese, no? With the kimono or watanabe, everything is inside. And the photo is about the same. But we could talk like hours and hours about flowers, because I had to go into the history of our flower paintings, no? And it's fun. It's a good journey.
I have seen your past works several times, such as lips or chandeliers or chairs. And these were the flowers are simply it's beautiful and lovely. And I also felt that those chandeliers or chairs are also beautiful. Beauty. So I observed that you treat that being itself as it is. So I would like to ask, what's your thought about the things is being as
The
it
what?
is? Things is being itself
Yeah,
as it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I would like to ask what's that
Yeah.
means to you.
So I have a very good friend, James Benning, a filmmaker, or an artist, and I saw his beautiful films. He had a retrospective in Buenos Aires or something, and he said in a Q&A, he said, and he at that time was 70 something already. He said that beauty conceals political content, but we shouldn't be afraid of it. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a beautiful, there were so beautiful words coming out of him, But it was so beautiful because he had the age where he was so confident in doing whatever he does, and that if somebody thinks that this is that beauty, what he meant was that beauty conceals political content, but we shouldn't be afraid of it because he was so confident, And I was in my 30s, and I was like, when I get old, I want to be like that. That was what, it's like these kind of moments when you learn from other people, that I'm going to work for that.
Thank you so much.
It's good? Okay, enough?